By the way, Alex told me that you haven't been going to church. Do you want to talk about it?
Yes. He'd love to talk about it. That's right. I don't go to church. Do you go to church?
Of course I go to church, don't be silly. I'm a Christian.
Oh, I see. Well then, why do you go to church?
Well, because the Bible teaches that we should go to church.
It does. That is very interesting. Where does it teach that?
Well, it says in Hebrews 10:25 not to forsake assembling together.
I see. But, does it say anywhere that you need to go to church? I fully understand the need for fellowship and have fellowship every day with my Christian family. They come over in the evening and we eat together and read the Bible together and pray and worship together every night. But I am wondering what verse says that Christians need to go to church.
Well, there aren't any verses that state specifically that a person must go to church, but the word church is in the Bible, so it must be biblical.
I see. I have noticed in my English translation that the word church is there, but are there any verses that explain what the word church means?
I can't think of any offhand.
Really? Then why are you going to church, if there are no verses that tell you to go there and you don't know of any verses that explain what church means? I know of a couple verses that come close to defining the word church if you are interested.
Sure, what do you have?
Well, 1 Timothy 3:15 says that it is the household, or rather, family, of God. It also says that it is a kind of pillar or support beam for the truth. That is the best verse you are going to find to define the word church in the New Testament, but it hardly describes what church is.
Yay. I can't think of any verses that describe church or church services.
Then, why do you go to church?
Well, there has to be a reason to go to church. I mean, the word church runs all throughout the New Testament.
It does in most modern English translations. But the first English translation, the Tyndale Bible, did not use the word church in the Christian sense.
Really? What word did Tyndale use?
Well, Tyndale used the word congregation most of the time. He did use the word church in his translation when referring to pagan temples, but never to refer to anything Christian.
I see. I guess there are other words you could use to define it.
Well, you know the New Testament was originally written in Greek, right?
Yes, of course. I have studied a little Greek. Actually, I took a few courses in Bible school.
That's great. Then you know what word church is used to define in modern English translations, right?
Yes, of course, the word ecclesia.
That's right. But modern English translations don't always define ecclesia as church, you know.
Really? How do they define it?
Well, look at Acts chapter 19 verse 32. It reads like this: some cried out one thing, some another, for the multitude was in confusion, and most of them did not know why they had come together. Were you able to find the word that ecclesia is defining?
Huh? Multitude?
Yes, that's right. It wasn't a church. The multitude in this case were not even Christian. They actually never met before today. They were not holding an assembly, and neither were they any kind of congregation or association. They were just a mob of a lot of people who started rioting because they didn't like Paul. So I ask you, is church a Christian word?
Of course it is. If you ask a taxi driver to take you to a church, he's now bring you to a Christian building where they have church services, might be Mormon or Catholic, but it is definitely a religious word.
Right. And is the word ecclesia a Christian word?
Of course it is. It means church.
I know, but you just read Acts 19. If the word ecclesia were a Christian term, like the word church, then the mob in Acts 19 would be a mob of Christians.
Ah, okay, I see what you mean. Right. The word ecclesia itself is not specifically a Christian or religious word.
Exactly. But the word church is decidedly religious and Christian. This shows us that there has been a problem in translation. Why is a secular word translated by a specifically Christian coined phrase? Here is another verse you might consider. Proverbs 21:16 reads as follows: "The one who wanders from the way of wisdom will end up in the multitude of the dead."
Wow, There's that word again, but this verse is in the Old Testament, which was written in Hebrew.
Yes, that's right, but the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible uses the word ecclesia to translate this word multitude. And as you can see again, this is not a Christian term. The word simply refers to a lot of people.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I wonder what Hebrew word was used in that verse.
Great that you mentioned that. The Hebrew word used is kahal. The Greek translation of the Old Testament almost always is used to translate the word kahal.
Wow, that means that the word church should be all throughout the Old Testament, but I never see it there.
Well, the words kahal and ecclesia are there, but they are not translated as church for some reason.
So how is kahal translated usually?
Well, the first case of the word kahal in the Old Testament is found in Genesis 28:3, where Isaac blesses Jacob who is running away from Esau. It reads like this: "May the sovereign God bless you. May he make you fruitful and multiply you. Then you will become a large multitude."
It seems like the words kahal and ecclesia have to do with a large number of people.
Yes, that is right. They are, in the spiritual sense, the people that God promised to Abraham that all nations would be blessed through him. Let's look at another verse. Genesis 35:11 reads like this: "Then God said to him, I am the sovereign God. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation, even a multitude of nations or races, will descend from you. Kings will be among your descendants." So you can see the idea behind the words ecclesia and multitude have to do with lots of people, and sometimes the people are not Christian depending on the context.
When I think of the word church, I think of church service, with the pastor and sermon and people gathering to sing praise songs, but I don't actually see the word ecclesia in reference to that at all in scripture, now that you mention it.
That is right. You will not find people going to or attending church services in the Bible because it didn't happen. The New Testament Christians spend every day together just like Jesus and the disciples did. Every day was fellowship and worship. And they didn't call that church. The word ecclesia is used in the New Testament just as it is in the Old Testament to refer to a multitude of people. That's all. Nothing more, nothing less.
Then why is the word church in the Bible?
Well, many lexicons feel that it should be. And while lexicons are very helpful and often cite their evidence for how they came up with their definitions, in the case of the word ecclesia, the only sock texts they cite are from scripture only. But the word ecclesia, historically, has never been used to mean anything like a church. It seems like they were just following tradition, but we can only speculate why the writer of a lexicon would use the word church to define ecclesia rather than the word multitude, especially after considering the verses we just read.
If the word church was not in the Bible, I don't know what I would do. What would I do on Sunday? There aren't any verses that tell me I need to go to church on Sunday. Now that I think of it, how am I supposed to fellowship with other believers?
That's easy. There are 4 wonderful gospel accounts for us to examine the lives of Jesus and the disciples. Just look at their fellowship and copy that. We have the book of Acts too. We can see how early Christians' lives. They shared every day together. They worshipped God together every day.
But I just don't have time to spend every day with my church. That would be impossible.
Well, it would be impossible with your church because the members all live so far apart. But if you had been discipling the people around your neighborhood as the early Christians did, then you would have plenty of brothers right in your walking distance who you could eat with and care for and study with and worship with every day, just like in Acts. And the only thing stopping you from that is the word church.